food with us and share community. So UUs are committed to the journey towards truth, justice, healing, and reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, and to putting into practice the principles set forth in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It has been 12 years since the Canadian Unitarian Council and UU Ministers of Canada issued a Truth and Reconciliation Statement. In it, they committed to assemble and promote educational materials for our congregations on the history and impact of the residential school system, and to uphold the recommendations of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In accordance with our principles, we respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. May we be good neighbors to one another, good stewards to our planet, and good ancestors to our children. Please enjoy this prelude by Gordon, and let us silence ourselves and ground ourselves for our time together. Thank you for that. It's really interesting to be up here and watch the keys that you can see in the piano moving. I want to ask Scott to come up and light our chalice this morning. We gather this morning in the spirit of wonder and wondering. We light this chalice as we do each time we gather, as it is the symbol of our faith. Resistance to the status quo was built into this symbol and into our tradition. Resistance is still part of who we are. May we always remember we are born out of resistance. Lighting this beacon of hope each Sunday is our act of resistance as we challenge the inequities at this time and in this place. Please now join us in singing hymn 360, Here We Have Gathered. Please stand if you're willing or able. The words will appear on the screen for Here We Have Gathered. if someone could grab the collection plates, that would be wonderful. So in addition to supporting this community, we also make a monthly commitment to the wider community. One half of the unidentified cash that is received is given to an outside organization. For the month of January, we will be sharing our abundance with Change for Children. Change for Children was founded in 1976 by a small group of people in the Edmonton area who were convinced that concerned Albertans could make a positive impact in the fight against poverty and injustice. The Change for Children co-founder, Hank Zip, said, "Ordinary people can do extraordinary things." And he was right. I encourage you to go to changeforchildren.org to find out more and find out how to help. If you wish to receive a tax receipt for your gift, you can use a donation envelope found on the table by the sanctuary doors. Please provide your contact information on the envelope so we can send you a tax receipt at year end. Many of our members and friends give monthly or annually through automatic withdrawal from their accounts. You can go to uce.ca to learn more about how you can contribute to our community. We thank you for your generosity and your support. Please now remain seating as we sing "From You I Receive" twice. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Can you still hear me? So UUs have a long history of resistance. I can only just slightly touch on a small bit of our history here, but it was really important to me personally to highlight some of the parts of our resistance history that I really do find very interesting. I encourage you to have a look at the newsletter and see that the new UU class and deep dive into the UU principles course are being offered in February, and you can get lots of great information there. Please sign up. So let's start by going way back to Michael Servetus, who influenced modern Unitarian views and was convicted of heresy. He was burned alive for heresy on October 27th, 1553. Exactly 419 years to the day before I was born, and 15 years before the Edict of Torda, which Reverend Rosemary will talk about later. Now let's jump forward quite a few hundred years to a famous period of resistance, the 1960s. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King attended Unitarian churches in the Boston area. And in 1966, Dr. King spoke at the UUA General Assembly. To quote him, "One of the great misfortunes of history is that all too many individuals and institutions find themselves in a great period of change and yet fail to achieve the new attitudes and outlooks that the new situation demands. There is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution." The year before his speech at the UUA General Assembly, Dr. King called people, and specifically ministers, to Selma, Alabama. About 45 UU ministers and 15 UU lay people arrived in Selma, including Viola Liuzzo and Reverend James Reed. Both of these brave Unitarians were murdered defending human rights. You can see them portrayed in the movie Selma. There's a fascinating history of lies that the KKK, FBI, and the Selma sheriff told to try to justify their murders. I really encourage you to learn more. In the 1970s, the UCE was the second church of any denomination to perform a same-sex marriage in Canada. The Winnipeg Unitarian Church beat us by a couple months. On last week's Sunday slides and on the TV out in the lobby, you can see pictures from the Alberta archives of members of UCE protesting for LGBTQ rights here in Edmonton in 1978. For decades, UUs have been supporting reproductive rights, the right to die with dignity, immigration rights, 2S LGBTQIA rights, and 5 years ago, we renewed our commitment to dismantling racism with our new 8th principle. And here we are definitely living in a time of turmoil. Last month, you might have seen UCE on TV supporting Amnesty International's Right for Rights campaign. And now in the States, 29 UU people, including 8 ministers, were arrested in Arizona for protesting anti-immigrant laws. A few months ago, a Unitarian minister was arrested for praying outside the Woodson African American Museum in Florida as workers attempted to cover up Black Lives Matter mural. On the Edmonton Unitarian Universalist, Edmonton Unitarian Facebook group, you can see a video of Reverend Ashley Horan, the UUA Vice President of Programs and Ministries at the No Kings rally in November. She stated in the video, "When our communities are at risk, when democracy is at risk, when the planet is at risk, it is our moral duty to come together." Reverend Horan named the urgency of this moment and spoke to the collective responsibility we share in responding to it. On Wednesday, the same minister, Reverend Horan, was only a block away from the murder by ICE agents of Renee Nicole Good. Reverend Horan rushed down and began live streaming to bear witness to what is happening in the States right now. She is part of the UUA's Side with Love movement. The Side with Love's 30 Day of Love begins later this month. The theme is Love at the Center, reimagining the world as it could be. What could be more Unitarian than trying to make the world a better place? They state on their website, "At a time when fear, violence, and extraction dominate our politics and our planet, we practice another way. We believe love is not fragile, it is fierce. It grounds our organizing, fuels our imagination, and sustains our communities. Over the 30 days of love, there will be written reflections, conversations with UU theologians, multi-generational family activities, reflection questions for journaling, meditative practices, and coloring sheets connected to the weekly themes. If you're interested, you could go to sidewithlove.org/30 days of love. So even with resistance, there can be love and joy and solidarity. Next Sunday, we'll explore joy as resistance. Being here and being part of our community allows us to gather together in mutual support. I'm so thankful that I have found this group of resistors. Well, all of this has been serious and kind of sad and kind of happy, but I did promise that there were going to be bad jokes, and I will get to them shortly. But now I want to tell you a bit of how I came here to the Unitarian Church of Edmonton, UCE. I met my partner in 2007. We were both part of a singles group that met weekly. At first I was interested in Scott, but then I found out he went to church. Well, I was born into an anti-religion, atheist household. Not just atheist, anti-religion. My only experience with religion was with some extended family that were ultra-religious and ultra-racist. Not something I wanted to be associated with. Eventually, I dragged some information out of Scott about UU and thought it didn't sound so bad. Scott was born into this congregation, and one of his old jokes is, Unitarian is like Fight Club. First rule is you don't talk about Unitarian Club. Yeah. The movie Fight Club is from 1999, so some of you might not get the joke. But the idea behind the joke is that we're not very good about talking about ourselves and what UU means to us. There are many UU jokes and stories that help tell us a bit about ourselves. We make fun of ourselves, but it also explains to others what we're like. I found a whole page devoted to jokes on the First Unitarian Toronto website. All of them contain at least a grain of truth about who we are. But as we say, If you have 3 Unitarians in a room, you'll have 5 opinions. So some of the jokes aren't relevant or maybe even funny, but I hope you do get a giggle. I've picked just a few to share. Here we go. So, a visitor to a UU church sat through the sermon with growing astonishment at the heretical ideas being spouted. After the sermon, a UU asked the visitor, "So, how did you like it?" "I can't believe half the things that minister said," sputtered the visitor in outrage. "Oh, good, you'll fit right in." As a member of the Coriolis choir here, I find this next one funny and do appreciate all the practice that we do so we sound so great on Sundays. But the joke goes, question, why can't you sing very well in church? Answer, because they're always reading ahead to see if they agree with the next verse. A traveler couldn't find a UU church. After looking in the center of town, the suburbs, and finally was out in the surrounding countryside, found a farmer and asked them, "Am I too far out for the UU church?" The farmer replied, "Nobody is too far out for them." And finally, some UUs think that life after death is one big annual congregational meeting, but they are not sure whether the meeting is heaven or hell. The annual UCE AGM follows Coriolis Choir service on Awakening Curiosity in May, and that you can decide for yourself. I hope I have awoken your curiosity and you will look further into UU history or at least learn some more UU jokes. Now let us join together in singing hymn 303, We Are the Earth Upright and Proud. Please stand as you are willing or able. The words should appear on the screen to We Are the Earth Upright and Proud.
So no, I don't know that hymn either. It's just to let you know, all the hymns were written around the time of the Edict of Torda. So they're all written over 450 years ago. All of the tunes to all of the hymns were written in the 16th century. Most of them are old German psalters, is what they're called. Most of the hymns that were sung in Unitarian and, not Universalist, there was no such thing then, but that were sung in Unitarian churches and Lutheran churches and all the rest, Calvinist churches, Reformed churches, they were all mostly German psalters. So they sang the Psalms mostly. And a lot of them were written by the old gentleman himself, Martin Luther. One of the things that one of my profs said to me when I was in seminary is the reason you start singing some of those old hymns that Luther wrote or Calvin wrote or Charles Wesley wrote. And she said, well, no wonder the Reformation took off. These hymns, are absolutely fantastic. And I invite you to go through our hymnal and find the ones that were written in the 1500s. They are quite phenomenal. They're old Reformation hymns. So yes, they're a little unfamiliar to us because I don't normally choose hymns that are written in the 1500s. I usually try to find hymns that are a little more upbeat. However, we're talking today about the 16th century, about the birthplace of Unitarianism. So I also wanted to bring the music of the day into this service. So I also want to let you know, do we have any news on the sound for the meditation? Okay. So I chose some music that would have been popular in that time as well. Some lute playing by a fellow that it sounds like Bela Bartok, but it's not. It's Barf something. It's Barf something. Shoot, what's his name? Anyway, he's been, there's this fabulous modern day lute player that has done a wonderful job bringing his music back to life. So that was going to be at the beginning of the service or right before the beginning of the service, and then when we are finished with the meditation time. However, the soundboard's been messed with since the last time we were up there. And so that probably will not be happening. So I apologize for that to all of you. We're just going to muddle through. Sometimes there's no sound. And back in the day, there was mostly no accompaniment. People sang a cappella or sometimes with organ. So we're just reenacting that, aren't we? So, but as we move into a more as you called it, kind of the meat of the service. It was a great reflection, by the way. Thank you. That was awesome. As we move into that, I want to invite you to look into your hearts and into your minds, and we're going to enter a time of lighting candles of joy and concern. And if anybody has a moment, I don't see, is there fire on the tables to light? If someone could, okay, thank you. We do this every Sunday, don't we? We not forget the fire, but we take a moment to think about what's going on in our lives. Is there something to celebrate? Is there something that you're really worried about? Maybe you've got some change on the horizon. Maybe life is difficult for you right now. Maybe someone in your family or yourself is experiencing some health crises. This is a time. In the 16th century, it would be a time of prayer, wouldn't it? And this is kind of our way of remembering those that need us to think about them, or to think about ourselves, to hold ourselves up with some intention, to hold each other up with some intention. So it's not just lighting candles, is it? It's our way of bringing intention into our lives and celebrating with one another those moments that are meaningful. And so I invite you now, as you are able, to light a candle of joy and or of concern. The tables are ready. Thank you, Karen. I invite you now. I'm going to take my puffer. Used to play. I'll ask Karen to light one last candle for all the joys and concerns we still hold in our hearts. And another one, it was Yvonne's 65th, it's going to be Yvonne Moreau's 65th birthday, and she asked that a candle be lit for a person in her life that is struggling. I beg your pardon? I have a microphone. It's supposed to be working. It says it's working. No, yeah. Okay. That's okay. Who here cannot hear me? Is, John, is it coming through? Is nothing coming through the app? I got a big voice. Right. Let's just give it a sec while I figure out what's next. Yeah. I need a hymn book. It is a very creative day. Is this one working? John, can you hear it through the... Oh, you don't have it. Okay. How about up there? Is there sound? I can't see. We're all good. I need a hymn book. Could somebody bring me a gray hymn book, please? Because the next thing is a responsive reading. Number 566, God is One. This was written by Francis David, who was the first Unitarian minister. He was promoted to Bishop of Unitarianism for the country of, it was Hungary then, which is now Transylvania. It was all kind of in that area there was Turks, and it was part of the Ottoman regime. I'm getting the nods from Audrey. Audrey knows all. So I was like, I better get this right, otherwise Audrey will let me know. Audrey was there last year, yes. So at the beginning of Unitarianism, what was Transylvania was part of Hungary, and now it is part of Romania. But Francis David was the first minister, Unitarian minister, and he wrote this responsive reading, 566, God is One. That is his line, God is one. Also, we not need think alike to love alike is also his words. So I will read the plain text, and you will read the italicized. In this world, there have always been many options about faith and salvation. What'd I tell you? There must be knowledge in faith also. Religious reform can never be all at once, but gradually, step by step. The most important spiritual function is conscience, the source of all spiritual joy and happiness. We must accept God's truth in this lifetime. Salvation must be accomplished here on earth. And you don't need to say the Hungarian words. We'll just say together, God is one. God is one. Wonderful. Okay, let's see if we can make this work. More creative. So I'm going to start my time by reading the Edict of Torda. His Majesty, our Lord, in whatever manner he, together with his realm, for what he means by the Diet, legislated in the manner of religion at the previous Diets, in the same manner now, in the Diet, he reaffirms that in every place the preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his understanding of it. And if the congregations like it, well, there's no other word there. Well, if not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied. But they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teaching they approve. Therefore, none of the superintendents or others shall abuse the preachers. Did you hear that part? Shall abuse the preachers. No one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone according to the previous statutes. And it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment or by removal from their post for his teachings. For faith is the gift of God. This comes from hearing, which hearing is by the word of God. And that is the Edict of Torda. I meant to bring up there's a picture on the back wall. If you're going all the way around, there's kind of a circle at the very back wall. There is a picture of the room in which this decree was given. Who's heard of this? Who's read this edict before? I'll try to stay close to this microphone because my head mic's not working, is it? No. It is? Oh, excellent. Freedom. We'll talk about religious freedom and I will gain freedom. So as Karen said, during the month of January, we are practicing resistance. And I want to let you know that the second Sunday of each month going forward from here to the end of the church year, or at least to May, we're going to do a world religions series. And we're going to start with ourselves. Because resistance and Unitarianism go so very well together. But next month, on the second Sunday, we'll be looking at Buddhism. So put that on your calendars, and then we're going to move through 5 of the major world religions on the second Sunday of each month. So to start off this exploration of world religions in the second Sunday of each month from now to the end of the year, as I said, let's start with our own beginnings. The Unitarian belief was born out of resistance to the ideas of the church, state, and society of the time. And, as Karen has pointed out, we've been resistant ever since. I'm proud to be a Unitarian, and of course identify also strongly with our Universalist faith. However, Universalism is for another day. So let's dive into the birth of Unitarianism in the 1500s. The Edict of Torda was proclaimed in Torda on January 13th, 1568, in the East Hungarian region of the kingdom of you okay? The king was John Sigismund. It was his kingdom. The delegates of the 3 nations of Transylvania, the Hungarian nobles, the Transylvanian Saxons, and the Szeklerys adopted it as at the request of the monarch's anti-Trinitarian court preacher, Ferenc or Francis David. The 16th century was a time of religious turmoil, mostly due to the fact that people weren't happy with the practices of the established church. There was a lot of pushback against the Catholic Church. So back then, before the Reformation, you have to realize that everyone was Catholic. There wasn't anything else. There was Jewish folk, there was Catholic folk, there was Muslim folk. And then in India and beyond, of course, they had their own religions, but there wasn't the mix and mingle that there is now. So everyone was a Catholic, and there was all this pushback in the 1500s against the Catholic faith and the rules of Catholicism. And that's why the Reformation happened, was because of this pushback, that people were so unhappy with the bishops and the priests of the time. And mostly it was about the indulgences, that you could buy your way out of sin. So people would pre-buy indulgences in those days. So just in case you sinned, and then you're already forgiven. So you could basically say, well, I'm going to do these 5 sins this weekend, so I need to buy 5 indulgences and then I'm good, right? And so there was a lot, therefore there's corruption, there's abuse, there's all kinds of shenanigans, as I would call it. To be nice, yeah. And the Reformation itself was a really radical move. It was a resistance move. So, like, the whole Protestant Reformation was born out of resistance, not just Unitarianism. Problem with going off script is that, okay, the Catholic Church at the time persecuted and killed anyone that did not profess their faith as Catholic, and especially that they believed in the Holy Trinity. They had to have allegiance to the Trinity. And by the Trinity, I mean the idea that God is in 3 persons. Remember I'm sure many of you remember the old holy, holy, holy Lord God. God in 3 persons, blessed Trinity. And that was the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that they worked together for humanity's betterment. A whole service could be created, perhaps many services could be created just on the fact that there was tremendous religious discord, and I dare say terror in those times. This was at the time when everything was being questioned, and it culminated in Martin Luther's nailing of his 95 theses to the door of All Saints Church in Wittenberg on October 31st, 1517. This was the beginning of the Reformation and laid the groundwork for the beginning of religious freedom. For us as Canadians and as Unitarians, it is hard to imagine living under threat of death for our thoughts, right? You daren't even speak them maybe to a family member. Our thoughts, and especially our beliefs. Resistance was dangerous, and it was lethal. No good story is complete with a little bit of drama. And it was Miguel Serveto, he was Spanish, or Michael Servetus, as we like to call him, that provides the fodder for resistance in this era. His writings centered on anti-Trinitarian beliefs, suggesting that Trinitarianism was not supported by the Bible. His story is full of international espionage, a burning at the stake of his books and himself in effigy. He was imprisoned. He escaped from prison wearing the clothes of the day of a woman with a veil over his face. But he was finally captured by the Catholics. It was the Catholics who were looking for him. After being seen and reported to the Catholics by none other than the good old gentleman Calvin himself, the founder of Calvinism. He was himself finally burned at the stake after eluding the state and the church for a few decades, actually. His story is fascinating, and what I wrote there was like that could take up like 2 or 3 services, is just learning about Michael Servetus. He was a fascinating character. In the 16th century, people believed what they were told to believe. And the idea of freedom of thought and any kind, let alone religious thought, was considered to be highly heretical, dangerous, and fatal. This is why, in my opinion, the beginnings of religious freedom and tolerance in Eastern Europe was so amazing and so remarkable. It took great courage to publish anti-establishment ideas. Servetus knew he would be imprisoned or killed for his ideas, but he published anyway. It was, what I put was, it took great courage to publish anti-establishment ideas, to suggest that people, always men of course, could debate different theological beliefs. Is amazing. It was just not heard of. And how were these beliefs practiced? What was a typical Unitarian service like in the 1500s? Well, but my research tells me that it wasn't too unlike a Lutheran service now, that you would go to Bible readings, a message by the minister, a sermon, we sing some hymns, greet one another, we use different language, of course, and then there would be Eucharist. These services were often held in former Catholic churches, and the ideas of reason and conscience were emphasized even by those churches, especially in the Unitarian churches. My understanding is that the Unitarian Church in Eastern Europe is still very much as it was over 450 years ago, and you can ask Audrey about that. Hymns, scripture. Yes, the Unitarians in Eastern Europe read from the Bible every week. A sermon based on the scripture. However, offering more liberal ideas and more broad ideas are discussed. And most Unitarian churches in Eastern Europe still practice taking Eucharist most Sundays. Unfortunately, and contrary to popular belief, the Edict of Torda did not address an individual's freedom to believe what they wanted. It had quite a bit of limitation. Only the freedom to choose their own minister and preachers. It was the first attempt at what we call now the freedom of the pulpit, that the minister that any congregation calls is free to speak and teach what they deem appropriate, within reason, of course, and with consideration of what the people are looking for, or at least in my case, that is true. One thing I learned about our beginnings years ago in my UU history and polity class was that even though people were tortured and killed for their beliefs, there still was great hunger for dialogue, just as there is with us now. Because we were humans then, just as we are humans now, and we have minds that wonder and wander all over. Eastern Europe, where Unitarianism had taken hold, and where some aspects of religious tolerance were in play, is where, this is what I found fascinating, is where scholars and religious scholars and leaders gathered in what is now Romania, to talk about religious ideas in what we would now maybe call a conference, and to freely discuss religious ideas and philosophies. I can sort of imagine these men kind of, because they would be men, that they would be kind of more relaxed perhaps, because they were allowed to speak their mind, and they were allowed to question the status quo. And so they were saying things there in Eastern Europe with one another that would get them killed in Western Europe. But they would come to Transylvania, what is now Romania, and have these conversations on a fairly regular basis, I understood. But can you imagine, like, they'd have to kind of keep it secret, right? Because then they'd go back to Western Europe. And my imagining is that okay, my only joke in this sermon. So my imagining is what happens in Romania stays in Romania. What can we learn from this religion today? From these early beginnings, the faith or Protestant denomination of Unitarianism was born. What we practice now would not be recognizable to Unitarians in the 16th century, perhaps, maybe a bit. In fact, you might be uncomfortable in a Unitarian service in Romania today. In North America, and especially in Canada, we have moved away from reading and preaching from the Bible. But that is not true for all Unitarians everywhere. Until recently, Unitarians would have considered themselves to be Christian. Another whole service could be constructed on the question, how could someone be a Christian and a Unitarian? Well, as I've said many times, we have many Christian Unitarians in our midst. However, they are mostly closeted. They're a little afraid to come out. A Christian Unitarian believes there was a human named Jesus, and that we can learn a lot from this exemplary Jewish rabbi. Christian Unitarians simply don't believe in the Holy Trinity. They probably believe in God, are not afraid to talk about the Bible, probably long for it, in fact. There are many hundreds of forms of Christians. Not all believe in heaven or hell, or that you have to be saved, or take the Bible literally. I'm thinking of our close theological friends and neighbors, the United Church of Canada, and in the States, the United Church of Christ, who we collaboratively created our Whole Lives program with. The United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalists Association created the OWL programs together. These are denominations that also do not take the Bible literally and who are welcoming and affirming of LGBTQ plus humans. We Unitarian Universalists certainly do not have the market cornered on freedom and tolerance. From our beginnings of rejecting the Trinity to today, Unitarianism has changed so much. When I go through older hymnals, which I want to do, or read Unitarian services from the early and mid-20th century, I am amazed at how much has changed. Probably more so here in Canada, as I said, than in the United States. We now discuss freely any theology, any idea in our services, for the most part. Maybe not any, but most. We try to use language that is inclusive of religions, genders, abilities, and ages, so that no one feels left out. In my early days of social work training, having just learned about gender-exclusive language, I got pretty militant about it. Surprise. I felt offended when the word man or mankind was used. I felt left out. I would stop listening or stop reading because it wasn't then meant for me. I was not a man. I was pretty radical in those days, but I don't think it's a radical idea by any long stretch of the imagination. We need to be careful about our language. As we have such eclectic gathering of people, such eclectic and beautiful people that come together to enjoy our meetings, our committees, our services, our potlucks. So we have to be careful about the language that we use. That is one thing that we have really grown into. My sense of being left out was real. And it is important that we do not use language that excludes a population. Ours is not an easy religion. We do not give people easy answers. And sometimes people need easy answers. There isn't one thing we can all agree on to let our minds and hearts rest. We have to work harder, dig deeper, find our solace and rest in other things than in the knowledge we are chosen or saved. For some, the rest and comfort from a collective knowing is essential, especially if one is suffering or perhaps recovering from an addiction. I remember a woman I greatly admired when I lived in Kamloops and saying to me, "We don't have much to offer anyone that's suffering." I went, "What? What do you mean?" You know, she was kind of right. We ask people, our people, to work for their beliefs. Sometimes people need the comfort of knowing. What we do offer is a mix. Freedom of thought and belief, freedom to take the time and rest, freedom to socialize how we wish to, and learn from everyone and everything. The world is our oyster, as they say. And that is, as I sometimes know, I know a lot because I could talk about anything in the world that's ever been written or thought or put down, or any movie or anything. So the thought that we can draw from anything or so many things is both a blessing and a curse. I think of us as having a very busy religion. So that is why it is important to take some time to let our minds and hearts settle, to let our bodies relax, and let the past week go, perhaps. Maybe you've had a rough week and you just need to come to church and let it go. Just to be here with people that you care about and that care about you. Or even if you're new here, potentially be cared for and cared about. So let's do that, shall we? Let's take a moment and rest. Let the week go. Renew ourselves. Start fresh for the week ahead. A spiritual reboot, if you will. So I invite you to place your feet on the floor. And the lights will come down in a moment. To feel the chair holding you. To let the feel of the gravity pull you down. Can you feel the gravity? Put your hands where they're comfortable, on your head, behind you, on your lap, face up, face down, whatever is comfortable for you. And then to slowly begin to move into noticing your breath as it comes in and out of your body. And I invite you to take a few deep, cleansing breaths. Breathing in life and energy and breathing out all that no longer serves you. Maybe it was a rough week. I invite you to let it go. Think about it washing over you and going away. And inviting the energy that is in the room to envelop you, to hold you, to allow your body to relax, refresh, and renew. I invite us into some silence. We'll take 2 minutes, approximately, of silence to breathe through the things that keep us up at night. The things that we're joyful about. The love we feel for one another. and especially ourselves. I love that moment when it goes back to a major chord at the end. It's such a beautiful piece of music. So I had put in here, I didn't know how the timing was going to be. I'd put in here a time of talk back where you could maybe ask questions or get some clarification, but I'm going to invite you to have those conversations with one another in the time of potluck, as our time has now evaporated. And it goes, for me anyway, it goes awfully quickly. And so we will conclude with our last hymn, The Blessings of the Earth and Sky. You should recognize the tune. It's hymn 308 in the Gray Hymnal and written in the 16th century. So I invite you to rise in body and or in spirit and sing our last hymn together.
So, can everyone hear me? Good. I thought of one more joke after Reverend Rosemary's. I was going to say speech, but whatever. Message. Thank you. And remember, 5 Unitarians means a multitude of opinions, so take this with a grain of salt. But how are UUs and vampires similar? They both have history in Transylvania and are scared of the cross. All right. If Scott could please come up and extinguish our chalice. So, Here and Beyond These Walls by Craig Rowland. As we extinguish this chalice flame, may the warmth of its light remain within us, guiding our steps and our hearts. Let us carry forward the strength of this community, the courage to speak truth, and the hope that transformation is possible. In each breath we take, may we remember that the work of love, justice, and healing is ours to continue, both here and beyond these walls. Go in peace with the light of this gathering to illuminate your way.
And before we head off to the potluck, I just want to thank you all for being here in person and online. Thank you to the tech people. It was really challenging today with the sound. Thank you, Karen and Gordon. And our hearts are with Robert as he convalesces in Glen Rose. And just thank you to everyone that took part in this service, and to those people that brought a potluck entry kind of a little bit on short notice. So go in peace, you wonderful, beautiful people. And so let's carry the flame into our week and into our hearts.